And while she does that, I will get started. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be around the globe. I am Nicole Bergstrom, Senior Director of Accessibility at Hilton. I am an ageless white woman with shoulder-length brown hair with lowlights, and I am relying on my green readers today. I am speaking to you from none other than a Hilton hotel room. I have the distinct honor of having built Hilton's accessibility program twice, once before the pandemic and once since. With this second round, I like to think that we kept the good, left behind the bad, and developed an even bigger, stronger, and exceptionally innovative program. I could take the entire time elaborating on all the ways this amazing team of mine is elevating the stay experience for our guests with disabilities. But the purpose of today's talk is to shine a light on cross-functional collaboration, accessibility accountability, and agile efficiency. As a quick background, we have a feature-rich Hilton Honors mobile app for both iOS and Android. Within the app, our Honors members can shop and book for a hotel stay, manage their Hilton Honors account, looking at their preferences, their points, their past stays, and even their Honors tier. They can also message the hotel directly. Our Honors guests can digitally check in, choose a room, and use a digital key to completely bypass the front desk and go straight to their room. As you might imagine, developing these capabilities is fraught with complexities, ancillary system dependencies, and competing priorities. As an accessibility team, the last thing we want to do is slow down speed to market. Yet, we have a job to do, and that is to ensure that all of these amazing app features are accessible to our guests with disabilities. And that, my friends, is what this amazing cross-functional team is going to share with you today. So before I steal their thunder, I better turn it over to them. Andrea, take it away.
All right, thank you, Nicole. My name is Andrea Skieries. I am a white female, early 40s with long brown hair who regularly wears glasses. I am the senior manager of mobile channels here at Hilton. Our team is spread out across different time zones and countries, and I'm located in Iowa, the heartland of America. Today, I'm excited to share with you how our remote mobile team members across 3 functional roles in engineering, design, and accessibility set up and use snapshot testing to collaborate together earlier and easier. We will demonstrate how to integrate snapshots into the build process, show how this helps verify design updates, and how content appears in different accessibility modes. We can even check the screen reader output before merging the code. So before we get into that, David will share our background story as to why we decided we needed snapshot testing.
Hi, I'm David Bruno, and I'm the principal platform architect at Hilton, focused on Apple platforms. I asked folks to call me Bruno since David is not a unique identifier on our team. So if you hear my co-presenters referring to either David or Bruno, that's me. I'm a tall white man in my early 40s, but I've always looked a little younger than my age. I'm clean shaven, have short salt and pepper hair with gray taking over a little more every day. I'm wearing a dark gray t-shirt with a graphic on it that represents the creative process. The graphic is a line that is moving all over the place at the start, but about 3/4 of the way into the line, it straightens out. Over that shirt, I'm wearing a dark gray hoodie. And I'm talking to you from my home office in Denton, Texas, a small city just north of Dallas. Okay, so what led us down this path? About a year and a half ago, we, the Hilton mobile team, started on an effort to add support for other languages to our Android and iOS apps. Our first language to add was Arabic, so we had to account for more than just different text being shown to our users. Our layouts also needed to adapt for right to left text, icons needed to flip appropriately, and our line heights needed to adapt to a script font. We used this opportunity to essentially rewrite the UI layer of our app, and since we were doing that, we wanted to implement all the modern best practices for accessibility, like dynamic type on iOS and font size on Android for text accessibility, as well as dark mode. To help support this UI variation, we started building a design system. But we had many different ways our UI could break with every code change. We could break light mode, dark mode, Arabic, different dynamic type or font sizes, or some combination of these things. I've been deeply immersed in the point-free ecosystem. And for folks that haven't heard of point-free, they are a couple of developers that are best known for a library called the Composable Architecture, or TCA, and for their weekly video series where they talk through coding problems from first principles, which I highly recommend getting your employer to pay for, although I would pay for my own subscription if Hilton weren't paying for it. And so the point-free folks also had a snapshot testing library, which looked very useful. So I had to sell the idea of using this to the rest of the team. And I think 3 factors played into my ability to sell it to the rest of the team. First, I'm a principal platform architect, so I have some organizational power. And while I try not to wield it too heavily, it does make a difference. Our UI rewrite, or number 2, our UI rewrite is part of a larger effort to change the way we work and encourage experimentation. So we're naturally inclined to try new things as a part of that. And 3, the scope of the change was limited to one small team. It's much easier to introduce changes to a small team to start, iron out any wrinkles in the process, and then propose to the rest of the team later. So I got the buy-in, we adopt snapshot testing, and it works well. We build up our design system, and we build features to match existing functionality in our app. Months go by, and things seem to be going smoothly. We've got experts from our accessibility team testing, and surprisingly, they aren't finding anything. I chalk it up to Jetpack Compose and Swift UI doing all the hard work, and we continue on. More months pass, and one day I use the app with VoiceOver, and things were very broken. But how were things broken? We had folks testing the VoiceOver experience for months. Well, turns out they weren't testing our new UI. We'd failed to properly communicate what needed to be tested, and so they were testing the existing UI. I kicked myself for taking a shortcut earlier in the process. We should have had a sync meeting where we made sure everyone was looking at the same thing. But some good came out of this. We put together a quick proof of concept for accessibility snapshot testing. We'll show more examples of what that is later. And we all decided to add those to our existing snapshot tests. So I've talked a lot about this snapshot testing, but next I'll hand it over to Andrea so she can explain exactly what that is.
Thank you. So snapshot testing is a software testing technique that involves capturing and visually comparing screenshots of a single component or a screen before and deployed to a testing environment. So for example, the before screenshot here on the left shows how at large text settings, the text in a CTA button was getting cut off and unable to be understood by people who increased their text size. So our team was able to easily notice this before committing code to the build, thanks to the snapshot. And then the after snapshot on the right shows what our cross-functional team agreed on as a good solution. The workflow is pretty simple and has just 3 steps. First, the snapshot produces an image of your view. If the view changes, it will be flagged for evaluation. Then the humans on the team can look it over and determine, was the change expected or not? Then the cross-functional team can collaborate on any changes they would like to see. And lastly, individuals can approve the merge request when they're happy with the results. So some of the major draws to use snapshot testing are it fosters earlier collaboration across functional roles. Design and accessibility can review what a screen or component will look like before the code is even merged and deployed to a testing environment to view on your mobile device. It provides a way to catch accessibility barriers earlier and gets more eyes on accessibility concerns, which turns mere mortal developers into accessibility superheroes. And ultimately, this ends up saving a lot of time for everyone and makes a better product for our users. I'll hand it over to Will to tell a little bit about how has impacted his work.
Hey all, I'm Will Alagan. I'm a Filipino male in my early 40s with short black hair and glasses. I'm located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I'm a senior accessibility analyst working with our mobile teams here at Hilton. And as I'm a accessibility professional who's mainly worked in web-based products, the snapshots help me learn more about accessibility in mobile apps. While the guidelines may be the same, there are subtle differences. For example, what mobile screen readers announce, the different text size modes, and other aspects of mobile. Also, it allows for more collaboration with both design and development. When I've been working with the snapshots, I've worked with developers and designers to fix contrast issues, element role issues on components, and I've also seen some developers identify some issues themselves. These snapshots are another part of our toolbox as accessibility professionals and allows us to support our teams more efficiently when they are designing and developing our products. Now over to Lauren for some of her benefits.
Hello, I'm Lauren Ludovisi. I'm a senior UX designer at Hilton. I'm Caucasian, nearing 40. My pronouns are she, they, and I have wavy shoulder length magenta pink hair with brown roots that I swear are natural. There's no gray being covered at all. Appropriately, my gray sweater has a pink Barbie logo at the pocket area. That collaboration between design and dev is massive. In so many organizations, there's just one moment of handoff from design to dev, and you just kind of hope everything works the way it's supposed to. But for us, the design dev collaboration is an ongoing conversation. And as mentioned, snapshot testing puts more eyes on the accessibility aspects of your designs, and more eyes means more voices have a say in it. That means a lot of self-advocacy. And this is a very diverse group of designers and developers, and a lot of us have accessibility needs of our own. The needs aren't just on the A11Y team. So we can say what we might need out of a design, or we might also have friends or family who struggle with certain things. So rather than just following WCAG and getting the basics covered, we're able to see the humans who are affected by our work every day when we work with each other. And on top of that, we can take aspects of accessibility into account that might have otherwise gotten missed. And I'm going to hand it now over to Bruno with some things to keep in mind if you decide to do this.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great benefits, but obviously with any technical solution, we have to deal with trade-offs. So I'm going to talk about some of the considerations, just so that it doesn't seem like we're only showing the positives and not showing any of the downsides. So first, the size of your Git repository will increase with the addition of snapshot images. They are images, they're large or somewhat large, especially compared to code. There's no real way around that. You can use Git LFS to help control the Git repository size, but that comes with its own set of trade-offs, including complexity and incompatibility with other systems. Your team members will need vision to approve the snapshots, or sighted team members will need to describe them. Source control platforms don't embed alt text for the snapshots automatically, and we haven't found out or come up with a good way to generate useful alt text. Training may be required for non-devs to use and gain access to the source control platform. I've worked places where it's difficult to get seats for non-devs, and you lose some of the benefits if other disciplines aren't part of pull request conversations. Fortunately, our management stepped up and decided that the benefits from collaboration on pull requests far outweighed the costs of the seats. And one of our developers stepped up to provide training to the non-developers so they knew how to use the tool. Another thing is that your UI must be consistent over time. For example, a calendar must always show the same date, or it could be erroneously flagged as having been changed. I think that this encourages best practices around controlling for your environment, but legacy code doesn't always work that way. Snapshots should be run for both iOS and Android. Everything that we are talking about here is done separately per platform because that's the way we work. And snapshot testing on Apple platforms has a number of rough edges, which they have earned their own slide. So we will talk through those next. Apple platforms, this is my wheelhouse. Love Apple platforms, but some things are more complicated. The test must be hosted to use accessibility snapshots. Hosted tests are slower to run than other unit tests, so we separate out our hosted and non-hosted tests so that folks can run most of their unit tests more quickly when iterating on a feature. Processor architecture affects rendering. So if you have folks on both Intel and Apple Silicon, or have CI machines on both, you have to reduce the precision of the snapshot tests so they don't fail on tiny differences between the platforms. Major OS versions affect rendering. So snapshots need to be regenerated for major OS versions, and it's important to use a consistent OS version when capturing snapshots. We handle this by asserting on the OS version and failing the test if the developer isn't using the expected version when running their snapshot tests. Similarly, the simulator screen density affects rendering. So we handle that, again, by asserting on the simulator type and failing the test if the developer isn't using the expected simulator. Making snapshot tests work on Xcode Cloud is a little complicated. I've written a blog post about this on my personal blog, and I'm happy to share it if anyone would like. There's no first-party support for snapshot tests. So since Apple doesn't support this use case directly, it means that they could subtly break between different versions. And Swift Package Manager does not play nicely with Git LFS. So as I mentioned before, we believe that the pain of these rough edges is greatly outweighed by the value we get out of these snapshots. So next, Andrea is going to talk about how we use snapshots and the value we see in them.
All right, our team uses snapshots to review how the app looks in dark mode versus light mode, catch color contrast issues sooner, see how content looks at multiple accessibility text sizes. We can determine if the touch target bounding box size is accurate or adequate. We can verify what the screen reader will announce and what the swipe order will be. We can see how the app looks in different languages. We started with a difficult right to left language. We will also have languages with longer words and some languages that use symbols like Chinese. And we can see how it looks at different screen sizes. So we'll have Lauren tell us more about how she uses snapshots from a design perspective.
All right. So the snapshot shown here is of our date picker in dark mode. For both dark mode and light mode snapshots, we check to ensure that semantic colors are being used and that the contrast is good in practice, not just, we made a guess when we determined our semantic colors and then they don't look good. For dark mode in particular, snapshots are very useful for checking that the colors we chose aren't layering in unexpected ways and creating areas of lower than expected contrast or causing confusion with the intended visual hierarchy. And contrast is more than just text, of course, and it's not just for the most common forms of color blindness. So here we're showing two snapshots of a heart-shaped favorite icon inside a dark gray circle-shaped container at two contrast levels, as seen by a fully colorblind user. In the first image, that before shot, the heart was designed as this sort of pink magenta color, not unlike my hair actually, that completely disappeared into the background for those users who didn't have full color vision. So the second image shows how much better you can see it after we changed the color to white. And this slide is just a quick screenshot showing how the before and after snapshots look in the actual Bitbucket repository interface. This is what I actually see as a designer if I log into the repo to take a look at what the developers have built. So I can see the old and the new, and I can see the differences between the two. And next up is Andrea with how she has used snapshot testing.
Yeah, I really appreciate the snapshots that show us how the content will look at different text sizes. So we can see how the UI adjusts to fit larger type. Adjusting your device's typesetting is one of the most common and important things people customize on their device, myself included. So comparing a couple of snapshots saves me so much time and effort compared to downloading the correct app build and continually adjusting my device's type settings. It's no fun opening up your phone when you forgot to change the type size back to how you like it. So one of the things we strive for with larger text is avoiding truncating the text whenever possible. So we have an example here showing at large text how we can stack buttons that were side by side to give the text more room to grow and show fully. The informative icons also enlarge. So it's a huge win for people with low vision. Another size-related accessibility guideline we're focusing on is touch target sizes. The snapshots assist us in showing an outline around each interactive element that helps us determine if we need to add more padding or space to a button. The example here is a snapshot showing a small X icon with a circle around it that is over an input field. The button is to allow users to clear text for the input field. And the snapshot shows us the target bounding box around the small icon is actually a bit larger, making it easier to tap on the screen. And now I'll hand it over to Will to talk about how he uses snapshots for screen reader announcements.
Thanks, Andrea. Another type of snapshots we have are snapshots with screen reader outputs. These snapshots will show all of the elements on the screen, each of them highlighted using different colors, and then show a list of descriptions of what the screen reader will announce for each element. This kind of snapshot helps when we're trying to see if a label for an element is descriptive enough or a role is coded correctly, like a button or a heading. The image on the slide you'll see is a snapshot for our new home screen with a visual representation of the home screen on the left side of the snapshot, and then on the right side of the snapshot, you will see screen reader outputs for each element. Each element on the visual representation is highlighted with a color that corresponds to a color on the screen reader output side of the snapshot. And then the next slide, I'll show you an example of what we've seen. So this slide has an example of what we will see in when we use GitLab merge request. In the merge request, we see the snapshot file as a side-by-side comparison of the file. The first snapshot on the slide is a pre-merge snapshot, and the second is the post-merge snapshot. This is actually one of the issues that I found. And in this example, I found an element that didn't have a heading role when it needed one. So the maker state element was previously coded as just text when it should be a heading element within our welcome component. And you will see this on the post-merge snapshot that this is fixed now, and it announces that it is a heading. In this example, I commented on the snapshot, noting that there was an issue with the maker state element, and I suggested to the developer that this was an easy fix and to just create a bug ticket for this issue. This was done, and the issue was fixed right away. Another thing that we can determine from these snapshots is the swipe order or reading order and how content is grouped together. By looking at the screen reader output on the right side of the snapshot, you can use the corresponding colors for each element and then compare them to the highlighting colors on the visuals on the left side. The elements in the screen reader output will announce from top to bottom, and from this you can determine the reading order. What these snapshots can't show us is how interactions work between elements, such as where screen reader focus goes when a modal or sheet is opened or closed, or also screen reader outputs for container elements, such as lists in Android. While these snapshots are a great way to quickly find issues on elements, they do not replace using a physical device when testing with a screen reader and the verbosity that a screen reader will give you on a physical device. Now I'll hand it back to Lauren to talk about localization.
One of my absolute favorite things that we can test with snapshot testing is localization, because we need to make sure that the text looks correct and that the layout still works when we're dealing with right to left languages like Arabic. So is there enough space for text in languages where words are very long, like German? In languages with really detailed characters like Japanese or Chinese, is the text big enough to read? In Arabic specifically, all the days of the week start with the same letter. So do we have enough space for the whole word on the calendar here? And Arabic needs sufficient vertical space for letter differentiating details like diacritics and accent marks. So is our line height set high enough for this? You'd be very surprised how often it's not. And as far as the layout, are there any unexpected line breaks that weren't there in left to right languages? Is the layout oriented correctly? Are there elements that aren't in the correct orientation, like icons that don't need to be mirrored but are, or layout elements that still need to be moved to the opposite side of the screen? And is the user's eye still drawn to the right places if the layout is RTL? And we can also use snapshots to test how the layout looks at different screen sizes. We need to make sure that the UI adjusts properly for different screen sizes and is still usable. Defining squishability rules in the style documentation and designing specific breakpoints and then hoping dev can fill in the gaps, that only goes so far. So snapshot testing lets you see any of the viewport widths you may have missed in between. Screenshots can show unexpected proportion issues like photos getting cropped or cut off in awkward places, or important screen elements getting pushed below the fold in a way that interferes with the user experience. This is especially important when you're bringing accessibility text sizes into the mix. As mentioned earlier, it's a lot faster to use a snapshot than to build the same screen in your design software 30 times to check for the interplay between text size and the change in the layout from the screen size change. So next up, we will hand it off to Bruno to talk about how exactly to integrate all this.
All right, so here on this slide are the steps that we'll talk through to integrate snapshot testing into your workflow. I'm not going to enumerate them here because each of the next slides is going to go through each of them. So step one, choose a library to integrate into your project. We use these open source libraries on this slide here: snapshot testing from Point Free, accessibility snapshot from Cash App in order to do the voiceover accessibility snapshots. And then we use paparazzi from Cash App on Android for all of our snapshot testing. Big thanks to the Point Free folks for snapshot testing and the Cash App folks for paparazzi and accessibility snapshot testing. These libraries are great. All right, so next, and sorry, catching up on my notes. Each of these libraries has a good README that talks through how to integrate the tools with common dependency management tools. So I won't go into too many details about that. In the chat afterwards, happy to share more details. And then one quick note, another caveat that kind of goes to the considerations for Apple platforms. When using snapshot testing with CocoaPods, you'll probably need to create and maintain a fork because the Point Free folks dropped support for CocoaPods a little while back. And so that's just another rough edge with Apple platforms. All right, so you've chosen the libraries you want to use. Next step is to decide which standard snapshots does your team want to implement. And so by standard snapshots is what snapshots do you want to capture for every single component you build or every single screen you build. And then I'd recommend that you create a helper method or a subclass for your team to use that. So you have one place that you define what all these standard snapshots are, and then everyone else on the team just uses that method. Over on the right side of the slide, is the varieties that we've chosen to capture. We've chosen light mode, dark mode, 4 different dynamic type or font sizes, all the locales that our app supports, talkback and or voiceover accessibility, and then iPad screen sizes. Your needs may vary. You might not have your app localized. So this would be decisions that you would need to make. Of what you would need to capture. You might not support dark mode right now. There's too many factors to be able to say these are the ones that should be captured for everyone. And so I'd like to call special attention to the fact that we use an additive approach to screenshot generation. By additive, I mean that we capture each of these categories separately and don't mix them together, at least not more than necessary. For example, we take our text size snapshots in English in light mode. So we don't take it also in dark mode. We don't take them also in Arabic. And we take our localized snapshots in light mode default text size. What this does is it greatly reduces the number of snapshots that need to be created, stored, maintained, and reviewed. Because if you multiply all the different varieties by each other, you just have a lot more snapshots. And most of the things that we care about, which we talked about during the examples that Andrea, Will, and Lauren went over, they're covered by this additive approach. Although we did, while creating this presentation, we did realize that talkback and voice over accessibility in our other languages is not covered. We probably need to add that. But if English text is truncated at the largest accessibility text sizes, then it will probably be truncated in other languages as well. Of course, we're constantly asking ourselves whether what we're doing can be improved. We may need to adjust this in the future when we localize it for languages that have really long words, like German. All right, so we've decided what we want to capture. Next step is simply writing unit tests. Snapshot tests are just another kind of unit test. So there's not a whole lot of learning curve around writing them. In the image on the right side of this slide is just some of our code that we use to generate snapshots. So, and this is for iOS or Apple platforms. And so we just have a subclass of an XC test case, and we just write tests to handle different scenarios. And then we call our helper method assert standard snapshots with the view. We're using Swift UI for our entire UI layer right now. So we pass in the view and it generates snapshots in those views. So after you write unit tests, then you review them. One quick point about the previous slide. On Android, the tests don't even need to start up an emulator. So the tests are very fast on Android. On iOS, like I mentioned before, they need to be hosted tests. So they're a little bit slower, but nothing like UI tests. All right, so then step 4, we review the snapshots locally. So there are many things I love about the talkback and voiceover accessibility snapshots, but this is one of my favorites. It's so nice to run a test and get very quick feedback on things that are obviously broken in the voiceover user interface. Over on the right side of this slide is a voiceover accessibility snapshot that has many incorrect descriptions because it was taken early in the development process. This is a component I was working on, and this was my pretty much first go, just naively implementing the component and hadn't looked at the voiceover user interface yet. The buttons are labeled with their icons, which is something like arrowhead underscore small underscore down dot regular, which is horrible. Things aren't grouped properly, and elements that are visually hidden are still showing the voiceover. But because this is obvious to me, this gives me the superpowers we talked about before. I can take this snapshot and I can iterate through the changes locally on my machine to make the voiceover UI functional while doing the same with the visual UI. So I can improve the visual UI and I can improve the voiceover UI, and I can easily iterate on that very quickly. Right, so after we've reviewed the snapshots locally, then we commit the changes to source control. As mentioned earlier, this can bloat the size of your repository. We use Git LFS to try to prevent this bloat, but as I mentioned before, that comes with its own complexities. I've heard of other organizations having methods where they generate the snapshots on CI instead of committing them to their source control tool. We haven't gone down that path, so I can't speak to it. But storing our snapshots in Git is working fairly well for us. All right, so you commit the changes, you push them to your source control management platform. Next step is to review, collaborate, and approve. Okay, so I love snapshot testing in general. And so this is another one of my favorite things about snapshot testing. The talkback and voiceover accessibility snapshots in particular. Anyone on the team can look over a snapshot and collaborate with other team members by just tagging them in a comment on the image. And so in this screenshot on the right, it's something that Will referred to earlier, where he can tag the developer on the snapshot saying, sorry, that might have missed this before. but the make your stay text should be coded as a heading. He said it's not a blocking issue, so can resolve this comment and be fixed in a bug ticket. Stefan responded back, tagging Will back, saying, let's create a bug ticket for it, and then shares the ticket. And then, as Will said earlier, it gets fixed, and the snapshots show that it is fixed. And so after it's resolved, you can resolve the conversation in the source control platform, and then Will can approve that merge request or pull request also in order to say, yes, this looks good. We can have people across all the disciplines, and we do have people across all our disciplines approving merge requests. So that's it. 6 straightforward steps that probably overlap with some of what you're already doing today. So here are links to the libraries that I've mentioned before. I will share those in chat also separately because trying to get links from slides is difficult. And next, I'm going to hand it back to Andrea to wrap up.
All right, thank you. As a few final takeaways, snapshot testing is a powerful tool for early cross-functional collaboration. It enables our team to catch many issues before deploying to a device, but it doesn't eliminate the need to also test on a physical device to verify some things like functionality, interactions, focus management, etc. It also doesn't eliminate the need to shift left even farther and seek out user feedback. To increase the usability of our websites and apps, we're building a user research panel of people with disabilities. So if you would like to be part of our research panel or know someone who would, please sign up using the QR code in the bottom right corner of this slide, or follow the tinyurl.com/Hilton-research-group link on screen. And now I'll hand it over to Nicole to finish our wrap up.
Thank you. Oh, team, they're inspirational, aren't they? What a testament to the shift left model of accessibility, catching things before code is committed. This is such a great example of what my mantra, my team knows this, you fail fast and fail forward. So while David kicked himself for not making sure everyone was looking at the same code base, I look at it as, wow, look at the outcome of all of that. And look at how we can support not only accessibility, but accessibility in our translated language sites. That is so cool. Talk about scalability, efficiency, and innovation. And while not perfect, David laid out costs and some of the technical considerations that might present barriers for your organization to adopt a similar approach. Nonetheless, I look at our snapshot testing as a testament to how committed Hilton is to collaboration, accessibility, and its willingness to look at long-term gains. Now, a question that might be top of mind is whether we do this for our web platform. The answer is it's on the roadmap. So we currently utilize ACT Cypress tests as part of our build process in our web and mobile web platform, along with manually accessibility testing at the user story level. Going forward, we will also be working on integrating snapshot testing into that web and mobile web area as well. And so with that, what questions do you have for all of us?
Yeah, thank you so much. I will kick us off with some Q&A here. We have got a lot of good questions in the chat. So let me grab the first one. The first question I'll toss your way is, are the snapshots the only accessibility testing technique that you use? That comes from TJ.
Will, do you want to take that one?
There are other ways that we do accessibility testing. But when we use the snapshots, they should be used to complement a physical device testing. They're there to find quick wins, and because the snapshots may not always behave like a physical device, they should never be used to replace physical device testing.
Great, makes sense. There's sort of a related question then, which is, what percentage of WCAG success criteria do you feel are caught using the snapshots?
Andrea, do you want to somewhat talk about our perspective on the specific WCAG criteria and checklists?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain items that it does definitely help with, like the touch target size, the new guideline for that. Color contrast issues are found both on text and non-text elements. Like some of the basic screen reader output, but it doesn't catch things like, keyboard accessibility, for instance. So if we had users who are using a physical keyboard with their mobile device, that's something that we'd want to test, using the physical device and keyboard. So I don't know about a percentage, but it's a good mix. It definitely, as Will said, catches a lot of the easy wins.
Great, thank you. What's up? I've got a question here from Ben, and it is, how do you write snapshot unit tests that are detailed enough to catch bugs, but not too fragile where they need to be frequently changed?
Well, and so the way it works, the tests themselves don't have to be changed, but the snapshots do change fairly frequently. Anytime the UI or the voiceover or the talkback UI updates, the snapshots need to be updated. I don't feel like that's a great answer. Like the tests themselves don't have to be changed, but the snapshots do. Not sure if I answered that well.
Oh, I think that covers it for sure. Let me grab another question for you here. You might have talked about this a little bit, but maybe to revisit. This is a question from Amanda, and she's asking, is the expectation that developers are doing the majority of the snapshot testing? I'm primarily trying to understand the needed makeup of a team to facilitate this type of testing.
So yes, we expect that developers write their own tests, and so developers would be the ones writing these tests. We do like our developers collaborating with our quality engineering folks to determine what varieties of snapshots might need to be created, and also with the rest of our team, our accessibility folks, our design folks, to determine like what different varieties need to be captured, because you could have different scenarios in a UI that you'd want to capture there.
Great.
I'll also I'll add on to that. Our agile delivery process might be a little bit different than others we've seen, especially when we talk about design and accessibility and where they sit. And in our agile delivery teams, our designers, so Lauren and Will, are actually embedded in the delivery team. So they're in lockstep with the developers as well as our quality engineering. There's no, Lauren alluded to this, there's no like throwing the design over the fence and then hoping that it comes out in the end. I mean, they attend all of the same agile ceremonies, the stand-ups, the refinements, the retros. So it's a very, very strong partnership, which is part of what makes this so successful.
Great, thank you. I've got another question here from Cal, asking about how many snapshots are usually added to a PR.
I need to count. So we try to keep our efforts small, which helps. And so I would say probably between like 10 to 30, possibly, like depending on the different, like the complexity of the user interface. If we need to capture it in like an error scenario or a loading scenario, or like how many different scenarios we need to capture it in, it would be each of those additive snapshots that I mentioned before: dark mode, light mode, dynamic type, voiceover, all of those. So 7 per scenario. And so it kind of depends, but I'd say somewhere between 10 to 30.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot. So that's why we like to have all of the cross-functional roles reviewing them. So not just one person has to review all 30 of these snapshots. And they're also labeled or named. So you can kind of skim through the list of snapshots and focus on the ones that apply to you specifically, like the accessibility screen reader output ones, or you can have just looking at the dark mode ones. So that's how we kind of split up the work that way.
Great, makes sense. I've got another question here for you from Khalib. Are there any snapshots that correspond directly to orientation of the content? For example, switching from portrait to landscape?
Yes, absolutely. That is one of the things that we look at when we look at the different screen sizes. As I mentioned before, it's not just the actual size of the screen, but viewport width takes into account both a larger device and a device that's been moved to landscape mode. So that is absolutely one of the snapshots that we do to make sure that things are not too spread out, too hard to reach with your thumb, too hard to make a connection between two elements, like if they're supposed to like be grouped together, that sort of thing. That all gets taken into account when we're looking at the different viewport sizes.
Wonderful. I think I'm going to grab one more question from the list here, and that is, how do you decide the scope of what should be displayed in a snapshot, single component versus whole screens?
It's tough. But I think part of it is over time, you figure out what works for your team. We have the benefit of having a design system. So we're a highly modularized app. So we have our design system in one module, and all the snapshots there are more at that individual component level. And then at the feature level, folks can look more at the screen level because all the components have already been captured in their own snapshots. So that's how I think about it in general, but it's kind of case by case at the same time, and I don't have great guidance.
Yeah, that's pretty much whatever we're focusing on building, whatever we're focusing on as far as the design work goes, that's what we're going to want the snapshots of. If we're working on a component that we know is going to be used all across the app, we want to make sure it's behaving the way it needs to behave at various screen sizes with the screen reader in dark mode, etc. And then when we need to test kind of the interplay between components to make sure that things are grouped properly, to make sure the proportions aren't off, to make sure things aren't getting pushed off the screen, then we're more likely to do the screen level.
Great. Thank you so much. I just want to thank you all again, Hilton team, Andrea, Nicole, David, Lauren, and Will. Great session. And for those of you watching, a reminder that you can join us on Discord if you want to continue the conversation.